Welcome to Hope for Recovery, a 12-step workshop, sponsored by the Saturday Serenity Meeting of Eating Disorders Anonymous, which is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they might solve their common problems and help others to recover from their eating disorders. Information about EDA can be found at 4eda.org, the number 4eda.org. Handouts for all sessions of this workshop can be found at edahopeforrecovery.com. And now, here's today's workshop.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to bonus session number 3 of the Hope for Recovery workshop. I think last time on bonus 2, I failed to introduce myself. I'm Regina, a grateful recovered member of Eating Disorders Anonymous. So we have been enjoying shares from members of our fellowship, and in bonus session 3, we're going to hear from Dylan, Elizabeth, and Michael. So here we go. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dylan. You ready, Dylan?
I'm ready. Okay.
All right.
So my name's Dylan. I am recovering from an eating disorder, and I've been in EDA since May of 2017. It was my first meeting. And I'm just going to start out just talking about what I was like and then kind of move into what I'm like now. So we'll start really early. I grew up in a kind of dysfunctional family, and my mom was bulimic throughout my whole childhood, and I remember finding that out when I was like 8 years old. And it was just, as you can imagine, like very stressful to just try to understand that as a child. And you know, I had parents that were very not very nice to each other. Like it was a lot of stress dealing with their relationship, and my mom was one of these people that felt like, oh, if I'm just perfect, and if I don't have any needs, and if I can just do everything, then my marriage will work out, my family will be happy. And I think I picked up a lot of those habits as well. Like, oh, I can control everything if I can just control myself. And so I really learned that very young. I learned to put others first and to really just be needless. Like all of my needs could be set aside. And I learned that in a lot of different ways. Definitely, you know, being a huge support for my mom. I had 2 other sisters, but I think I'm just the most sensitive, the most empathetic out of my family. And so I ended up being very, like almost like a surrogate spouse to her when she would have issues. You know, I from a very young age would learn a lot of things about my parents' marriage, and really was like her emotional support, more of a partner than my dad was. And so it just felt like there wasn't enough room for me and for my needs and my emotions. And so it was very early that I learned to just like put those in a box somewhere. So it felt really good, honestly, to not take up any space, because I got to be this like really a hero for my mom, and I got to rescue somebody, and it felt so good to have that kind of a role in my life. Like I felt good. And I got so much praise for it too. I learned really young to like accept praise instead of love. And that was like all I could think of was like achievement, and especially for like our bodies. You know, it's like both of my parents have strange relationship with food. And so, you know, we were very like all of us were praised for being very thin. And it was very important to be thin. People outside of our family, like we would go to restaurants, and my parents would like ridicule other people like for their weight. And it was just something that was like, oh, like this rule. It's like you are this size and anything else is unacceptable. You're worth less. And so I feel like the physical manifestation of like being small was just like a manifestation of that internal need to just take up no space, because my parents had no ability to hold any space for us. So I think that was like just a really important start to where my eating disorder behavior started. I got a lot of attention, and it felt good to be able to control something when my life just felt so chaotic. I also had My sister had dealt with addiction my whole life, and so it was just constant chaos. Um, and it just felt good to be the perfect, stable one. I could really control myself. Like I had no emotional needs. I had nothing. I ate whatever was on my plate. Like it was just like it was I could just be good, and that was what I felt like I needed. That was what I felt like my contribution could be to the family. But when I left home, things got more complicated, as they often do when we become an adult, and fell into addiction, used restriction and orthorexia to really cope with my life and find some kind of order. And it quickly just kind of developed into like an obsession. Um, I'm grateful that I never had to go inpatient, but I did really destroy a lot of my relationships with just my behavior. Um, and I think that rigidity comes out in a lot of ways, not only in my eating disorder, but the control and rigidity is like something that permeates so many areas of my life, including my relationships, and something that I really have to work on. And so but I think especially when I'm restricting, or when I was restricting, and I'm in this extremely obsessive rigid place with what I'm allowed to eat, it like the insanity is so much stronger. So suddenly I think I'm like allowed to tell my partner what she can do and how she should do it, and it really destroyed so much of my relationships. I think that was when the reason that I started coming to meetings was we just had just a regular day, we were having a fight, and she was just so tired of it. Like she's just like, I'm so tired of you being hungry all the time, taking it out on me. Like you are not fun to be around. And I had never really thought about it. Like it's like I just like kind of thought that was normal, like it was just like, oh, like this is the way I've always been. Like if I was hungry, I didn't ask for food, and it was just like you just do something else. And so it was just some part of me was just ready to hear that I needed to change, and I started attending EDA meetings like later that month, when I found the program, and it was just such a miracle for me. I'm just so grateful to have had that experience. Started out at an in-person meeting, which I was so grateful that I was able to do that, and like out in Arizona. And I think one of the first things I had to face was just like this real intense dislike of my own humanity. Like I just wanted to be this like needless, perfect like robot. I was like, oh, I wish I could just be that. Life would be so much easier. And so much of my program was just like developing compassion for my humanity, and like developing real humility, and just like coming to love that imperfect person that I am, and like coming to love other people as well, like not expecting that's another part, is these really unrealistic expectations, the perfectionism, unrealistic expectations for myself and others. And I will say that that's still something I struggle with, but it's like the volume is turned down so much, now that I'm not using my behaviors to cope. It's just like such a miracle. And my sister passed away in January of 2019. And that was something where I remember the eating disorder being so loud, of just like, no one would even care. Like, no one would blame you if you didn't eat, like that's normal. These things are normal, like when you're grieving. And I remember just like being so grateful for the support of just like doing the next right thing. And in the big book, it talks about first things first. And it's like when hungry, eat, and we just like take care of our physical needs first. And that is something I regularly have to remind myself in times of stress. It's just like, my sponsor the other day, I was stressed about something, and she's just like, well, have you showered today? Have you changed your clothes? Like, have you eaten? Like, what things can we get checked off, and then see how you feel after that and call me. And it's like it's like so simple, but it's not always easy. I think I've just been so neglectful, and I was so neglected, and I fell into a pattern of neglecting myself. And so this program is teaching me so much of like how to take care of myself, how to see when I have a need and how to meet it, whether that's asking somebody else to help me meet it, or whether that is like, using the resources I have to meet my own needs, which is amazing that I can do that now. I have a relationship with a higher power, which I never thought I would have. I grew up very fundamental religion, and it was so unpleasant. that I just thought, oh, this is not for me. But I have a relationship with a higher power. I pray, I meditate. I have like real serenity in my life. I don't feel the need to control everything. I do think like, I heard in a meeting recently, like we meet our stress with character defects first. And that is still the case for me. I still will meet a stressful situation with a character defect until I can kind of wrap my head around it. I'm like, oh, here's a different way to go about it. But I do love that program's given me that ability to pause and think of the next right thing, like ask for help from my higher power. Um, Steps 6 and 7 are so vital in my life, like every day of just like being willing to let something go and asking my higher power for help. In any situation where I'm having a difficult conversation, it's like, please help me let go of fear. Let me let go of the desire to control unrealistic expectations. And I pray to have, the opposite of those things present in my life for that moment. And I, I'm never going to be perfect. And I think I'm finally like accepting that. Like I thought when I got into program, all this would go away. I would be like the Buddha and I would be so much better. I'd be happy. But I'm really coming to accept like that. That's not what this is about. What it's about is just like accepting life on life's terms and um, using the tools to just have like a better experience of today. It truly is one day at a time. And I feel like I have so many tools. I have so much support. It's amazing when I go to a new therapist or a doctor and, they have to ask you all those questions about like your support system. And I get to just like, I remember like having no one, absolutely like maybe one person. And now I get to like be like, oh yeah, I've got like a ton of support. I've got like, I got my sponsor, I've got all these people, like I have real friends finally for the first time that I trust. Like I have real intimacy with myself and others. Like it's just such a miracle. And I love it. I love the program. It's like just so basic, but it's given me just my life back. And I'm just so grateful for AA for creating the 12 steps and for the founders of EDA. They just saved my life truly and saved the lives of so many of my friends and sponsees. And so I'm super, super grateful today.
Well, thank you, Dylan. That was awesome. Dylan, if it's okay, I'd love to ask you a few questions and chat with you a little bit. Is that all right?
Yes, love it.
All right, great. Okay, so you said something that I didn't understand. If you could clarify, my parents had no ability to hold space.
So when I said that, I think I just meant that my parents really didn't have the emotional capacity to allow us or to allow me to just be myself, be messy, be loud, be angry. Like they just couldn't really process the emotions. So we were, go to your room, be quiet. Like it was just didn't have a lot of space for any kind of emotion.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a woman who was not very happy with your ED behavior. Did that relationship go away or?
No, we are actually married and we've been together throughout my whole recovery. And she actually got into recovery for something else, into another 12-step program shortly after I found EDA.
Oh, that's so nice. How did you find EDA?
So I was actually, in my search for a program, I tried an abstinence-based 12-step program, and I was lucky enough at my first meeting that an EDA member was there who suggested that I, try an EDA meeting. So I've been coming ever since that.
That's so interesting. So you were at a different food-related 12-step program, and someone said, "Hey, come over here. It's better."
Yes, exactly.
I want to share a couple things that popped for me in your share. You said, I was neglected and I fell into a pattern of neglecting myself. I thought that was so articulate. And the other thing is how you talked about calling your sponsor and your sponsor going through the basic needs rather than anything else first. I thought that was really good. I have noticed that sometime I could be a hot mess if I take a nap. I'm like, wow, Shocking.
Yes.
All right. Do you go to a lot of EDA meetings?
I try to go to at least a couple every week. I go to a Tuesday Zoom meeting, a Monday night meeting, and then what is it, Sunday meeting, the like trans non-binary group. So yeah.
Okay. Well, good for you. And you shared with me previously that you're trans. And I was wondering, has the eating disorder had a different form now as a male?
Mm, definitely. So yeah, like being raised female, it was, as I'm sure you could understand, like there's a lot of pressure to be thin and look a certain way, and I don't think it's different for men, but it's like instead of being thin and small, like what was I had always been trying to do, it was like, oh well, now I need to exercise and eat more and be bigger, and that was really challenging. So it's like gone from like, yeah, just like looking at my body thinking like, oh, I'm too big, to now like, oh no, like I'm not big enough, or like I'm big in the wrong places. And it's yeah, it's like really fun to have both
Oh,
sides.
interesting. And that makes sense.
Hmm.
You came into EDA in 2017 and then your sister died. Was that in 2019? Was that alcohol and drug related death?
Yeah, she actually died by suicide.
Ah, I'm so sorry for your loss, Dylan. And the fact that you were in EDA at that time and were able to use the coping skills is just wonderful. I'm sure that a loss like that lingers.
Mhm. Yes, it is a heavy one, and I think she could have benefited from EDA as well. And it's always hard. This stuff is fatal, if it's not
Yeah.
treated.
Did you need to seek outside help at that time?
I tried, but I honestly found more support in the rooms, and eventually, probably like about a year ago, so about a year, almost 2 years after her death, I started going to like an outside support group for grief.
Got it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm also a survivor of suicide of a close friend, and it's startling and not easy.
Hmm.
Okay, but it's life on life's terms, right? The good and the
Yes.
difficult.
Hmm.
All right, I think we're going to stop, and very grateful for your beautiful, honest share with all of us. And I can promise you that you're going to help a lot of people by your willingness. Thank you, Dylan.
It's now my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth S. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm a grateful recovered member of Eating Disorders Anonymous. I'm sharing my story today to bring home 3 things that are true for me. 1, nothing is wasted. Everything you've experienced, tried at, failed at, succeeded at, and learned from is part of fully recovering from an eating disorder. 2, it's never too late. And 3, nothing, absolutely nothing compares to the peace and freedom of recovery. I'm living proof of that. My story begins with a diet. Simple enough, right? Just go on a diet. Everybody else was doing it, and I wanted to share the excitement. Did I need to lose weight then? Not really. I was a normal teenager, active and strong, insecure, and wanting nothing more than to fit in. But really, my story probably began a few years before that, as the eldest of 3 daughters in the home of a loving family, with a mother who always thought she was too fat when nobody else did. Our dad and everyone else we knew thought she was beautiful. She still is. But hearing her worry aloud about her tiny waist that, quote, ballooned into horrible hips and thighs, hearing her talk about, quote, good foods and bad foods, about being good or bad, couldn't help but leave an imprint on my young mind. My childhood was spent in rural Japan on a college campus where my dad studied Japanese and taught theology. Despite my mother's worries about her own body, I remember feeling agile, strong, and athletic myself. I was always up for adventure, usually leading a pack of equally energetic kids, riding bikes, climbing trees, strategically picking our way along the intricate geometric borders of contiguous rice paddies, as careful as tightrope walkers to avoid falling into the wet brown mud where emerald green shoots grew. It was a beautiful countryside, and I felt extremely lucky to be part of this lush outdoor natural world. Not until we had returned to America when I was nearly 13, and even then, not until I had my first real job at a leading East Coast book publishing company at age 16, did I get the brilliant idea to go on a diet. Yes, I'd be like all the other pretty girls. That's what we called ourselves then. And I really did want to be just like them. At 5'4" I was never going to be as tall as I wanted. Curvy instead of waif-like, I was never going to be as thin as we all thought we should be. Blessed or cursed by a transparently earnest personality, I would always be the opposite of cool. But this one thing I could do. I remember stepping onto my mother's scale for the first time as I entered the world of dieting with a bang. That first diet prescribed 9 hard-boiled eggs on day 1, and maybe nothing else. I can't remember exactly. The diet was named for a world-class medical organization, which actually had nothing to do with creating it, and proceeded to direct the aspiring dieter through one day after another of single foods for 2 whole weeks. I think I lasted 10 days. And the numbers on the scale did go down. I learned to weigh first thing in the morning before taking even the tiniest sip of water. And by the end of the 10th day, with the bathroom door locked, I would remove every stitch of clothing before stepping on that scale. I figured out that I weighed the least at 5:45 a.m., which would become my magic weighing moment for all my years of dieting. Because even though I couldn't stick with my first diet, and even though the scales numbers moved back up pretty quickly after stopping the insanity of those single food days, I had learned, or thought I had learned, 3 important things that I would believe for the next 50 years. The first was that diets absolutely work, and what I weighed is the only measurement of my life's success or failure that would matter from that point forward. The second was if a diet didn't work, it was only because I hadn't done or kept doing something right. And the third was that this magic was just slightly out of my reach. The perfection, the belonging, the looks, the beautiful body, the cool. But if I could just stick with it long enough, everything I wanted would be mine. I couldn't possibly have known what those exciting first 10 days of that first diet would actually cause, but it didn't take long before I was firmly imprisoned inside the secretive, shame-filled, impossible world of an eating disorder. I would stay locked in that prison during the rest of high school, all of college, during a year spent teaching English on a Micronesian island, as a newlywed and as a heartbroken young divorcee a short 3 years later. I would never call what I had an eating disorder because I didn't know that was a thing. I only had names for myself: undisciplined, weak, stupid, fat, hopeful, hopeless, impossible. Ooh, newly excited. I finally found the right diet. I started the diet. Good. I went off the diet. Bad. After my divorce at age 26, I lost a lot of weight, and for the first time in my adult life, felt confident and kind of sexy. I learned to dance and went out dancing almost every night. It was an exciting time, not stopping to breathe or catch up with myself. It was thrilling, but it couldn't last. Because as I've now discovered in EDA, I had never learned how to handle my feelings. I'd replaced compulsive restricting and binging with a whole lot of going out, dating, and dancing. Pretty soon I got tired of dating. I met and fell head over heels in love with the beautiful man, inside and out, I would marry 3 years later. I stopped partying and started gaining weight. Just a side note here, in August 2022, my husband and I will have been married 40 years, but it's only in the last 2 years that he's had as his partner someone who knows how to feel, express, and be fully responsible for her own feelings. I think it was about 5 years into our marriage when I started replacing diets with non-diet programs. I went to workshops, joined support groups, and was told to adopt something besides the numbers on a scale as a measure of my worth. I chose clothing size and decided that the perfect size was at least one size less than I already wore. That's the thing about eating disordered thinking. You can't win. You can never win. Being obsessed with food and body size generates a series of conclusions about ourselves that make it impossible to do anything right or to do anything right for long. I remember the lists of contradictory rules, explicit and implied, that I carried around in my head every minute of every day. Don't eat. Don't eat after 4 p.m. Only eat after 4 p.m. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. Don't eat fruit. Only eat fruit. Carbohydrates bad, protein good, protein bad, vegetables good. Big meals once a day, 6 small meals. Never weigh. Weigh every morning at the exact same time. Trust your body. You cannot be trusted. Exercise right before bed. Exercise right when you wake up. If you're happy, you'll be thin. If you're thin, you'll be happy. My only temporary relief from obsession with food and my body size was when, after 10 years of marriage at age 40, I got pregnant. Somehow having a life growing inside my belly gave me freedom to stop restricting, and the compulsion to overeat magically disappeared for those blessed 9 months. I ended up at almost exactly the same size after both pregnancies as I'd been before getting pregnant. Of course, whatever size I was would never be small enough. And of course, the restricting and its consequent binging started again as soon as I gave birth. During those years, I was neither thin nor really unhappy. I do have an amazing husband, and we have 2 fantastic kids. I had built a consulting business in healthcare technology, coaching, and project management that would succeed and thrive for 35 years. From the outside, I looked pretty good. Overweight, sure, but a high energy, communicative leader and someone who readily offered advice to others who wanted what I had, if they had only known. Because the secret I could never authentically share with anyone was how ashamed and desperate I felt inside, all day, every day. My successful outside had a disordered, dispirited, hopeless, terrified inside. By the end, I realized that everything I had ever tried had worked. Diets, non-diets, aversion therapy, abstinence-based 12-step food programs, in and out for 20 years. Every single one of them worked for a while. As my disease progressed, they worked for shorter and shorter periods of time. My body stabilized at its overweight size, and in the end, I was helpless to stick to any program that altered my entrenched, restricting, overeating habits for more than 4 days. I was doomed and resigned to living the best I could over top of hopelessness, despair, and persistent terror about food. I was the problem. Peace and freedom around food and body size were not going to be available to me, not ever. Then my husband and I moved across the country, away from my family of origin, our kids, my circle of friends and colleagues, relocating ourselves closer to his family of origin as planned for our retirement. And that's when I learned about EDA. Here's what happened. One of my neighbors was in another 12-step program, and we had shared some gut-level feelings about obsessions and addictions. He saw a poster about a meeting just starting at the Recovery Club called Eating Disorders Anonymous. He sent me a picture and a text, and I went to my first meeting. 4 people were there, and they read out of a green big book. I recognized myself in the readings, but even more important, I felt I might have found a home. I bought my own EDA big book, went online and printed out all the brochures from the EDA website, about a couple of other eating disorder books, and read everything, word for word, cover to cover. I learned that what I had was an eating disorder, that it was a thing. And EDA believed recovery was possible. I loved that brochure, EDA Recovery Milestones and Balance. I printed it out and tacked it up on my mirror. I stuffed it in my glove compartment, folded it in my purse, and carried it everywhere I went. I read it over and over. I still didn't believe I could recover, but I kept going to that one meeting, thanking my lucky stars I had that. And when a sponsor finally became available across the country, I jumped in with both feet. I'm so glad my sponsor had me start the 12 steps from step 1 in EDA. Learning and practicing the 12 steps, especially doing the 10th step daily and spot check inventories as needed, was like finding a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I remember feeling like a fool, having to learn how to handle emotions most people must have learned how to handle when they were kids. But I was building my toolkit and developing a fellowship of honest friends in EDA to learn from and with. Within the first 6 months, I reconnected with a therapist I had worked with years earlier, and she became part of my recovery support team. I joined EDA in October before the pandemic, got my sponsor early the following year, completed the steps, and then the pandemic hit. Suddenly, there were meetings available all over the world. Plus, I did an EDA workshop on Zoom during the summer and fall of 2020. That fall, finally believing that full recovery might be possible, and having experienced a lot of freedom from my eating compulsions, I decided I needed some basic training on how to eat. With my sponsor's help, I found a dietitian trained in eating disorder nutrition and unlearned all the myriad of conflicting rules I'd accumulated over a lifetime. Within the first week of working with the dietitian, I felt an absence of terror for the first time in 50 years about when, what, and how much I would eat. I did learn how and what to eat. I learned that it really is about feelings, not food, that food is food, and the rigidity that had kept me terrified simply melted away. I learned that while my body's hunger cues might take a good long time to become active and accurate again, I could trust my enjoyment cues. Quite literally, I'd be eating a food I very much enjoyed, and when I paid attention, that same food would suddenly stop tasting good. So stopping when I'd had enough, quit being about struggling to manage anything, but became about listening to my wise, supportive body, who unbelievably hadn't given up on me after 50 years of my ignoring her. My body's hunger cues did reappear after about a year, but in those early days, her taste cues were already there for me. Today, after 2 years of peace and freedom from an eating disorder, I really can't put into words what a relief it is to not struggle with compulsions to restrict or to binge. The set of tools we get working the steps with a sponsor in EDA is foundational, and I'm growing my toolkit every day, reading, writing, meditating, going to meetings. I think everybody should have at least one home meeting, sponsoring, and doing service. Today, I know that what I look like is only one aspect of me, and certainly not the most interesting or most valuable. This program restored my life, deepened my relationship with my higher power and higher purpose, transformed my fear into inner peace, and my despair and self-obsession into freedom and service. Today, I don't keep secrets, and I know how to pause when I'm unsure or troubled. I'm worth pausing when I need to. In EDA, we do know that it is about feelings, not food, and that our eating disorder's voice is usually nothing more than a very loud indication that there's something we need to address in order to give ourselves comfort, inspiration, wisdom, movement, balance. Today, I know that feelings pass. They won't kill me, and I can make friends with them, both unhappy and happy. When I'm upset with someone, I just feel upset, and I check in to see if there's something I need to do, communicate, make a request, make an amends, which I quickly do and turn towards being of service. If I'm experiencing any uncomfortable feeling, my spot check and daily inventories keep me on an even keel. EDA's fifth column is a revelation because that's where I get to decide how to take action, resolving every issue and just move forward. That's a powerful feeling. That's freedom. Today, I know a few things for sure. Everything I ever did, tried, learned, and unlearned is part of what makes me who I am today. All of it grants me compassion, creativity, and understanding. Today, I pay attention to what's going right and learn from my mistakes. Today, I'm a grateful member of this fellowship who spent years imprisoned in an eating disorder as a teenager, a newlywed, a divorcee, a newlywed again, an entrepreneur, a new mother, and a grandmother, and who, after all that, recovered from that eating disorder in EDA. I'm not someone who spends time regretting, but just imagine if I had known, if I had had at 16 or 26 or 40 what I know and have now. Keep coming back. It's never too late, but it's also never too early. It works when you work it. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you very, very much, Elizabeth.
My pleasure.
All right, well, now it's my pleasure to introduce Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, this is Michael from Maine, grateful member of EDA, and thanks so much, Regina, for asking me to speak. I've been a member of EDA since May of 2019. I am really grateful to be a member of this program. I've been in 12-step recovery in general since 2007. And EDA has had a profound impact on not only in my eating disorder recovery, but just my relationship with 12-step recovery and in seeking a more balanced and healthier relationship with the 12 steps and a less abstinence and shame-based approach, which seems to work better for me. What brought me into EDA was I had a period of about 6 months or more of counting all my calories and weighing and measuring all my food, which just got really out of control and caused me immense distress. And it seemed that no matter what I did, I was doing it wrong. And I was either shaming myself for perceiving myself as not eating enough or eating too much. And I was also struggling with compulsive exercise and overworking muscle groups and not resting them. And had a lot of insecurity about my body and people's comments on it. And I just could not seem to engage with food in a way that didn't bring shame. And anytime I was encountering it, I was somehow underdoing it or overdoing it, and there just was always a judgment around it in my mind. So coming to EDA, it just really resonated with me, the message of balance versus abstinence, because I had tried other programs, food programs, and I'd read about a few others and interviewed people in a few different food programs, and just the rigidity that I had experienced in some of them. I'd tried a couple sponsors, and it just really didn't work for me and really didn't make sense. And I found some of the ideas I came across, such as equating certain types of food to be like alcohol to the alcoholic, to actually be pretty damaging to me, and I think contributed to eating disorder behavior for me. So coming into EDA, it's been a gradual process of healing for me. Things that have been really helpful: making outreach calls, recovery partners, connecting with, I have a couple really close friends from this program, and other people that I call as well. I was lucky to get a sponsor a few months in. I've been a little slow in going through the steps. I am in multiple 12-step programs, so sometimes I get a little overwhelmed by the step work and all the programs. But I am almost done with my 5th step in this program. For me, a lot of it has been healing from the perfectionism and just getting more okay with making imperfect choices and not shaming myself over small mistakes and over being human. And I find that even when I get off balance, like if I do something like overdo exercise, which is something I can still struggle with, if I recognize it and, maybe talk to someone in the program about it or talk to my therapist about it and just move on and say, I'm going to make a different choice next time. And it doesn't have to turn into this big shame spiral, which doesn't help me and just makes things worse. So I've been seeing in myself, like I did recognize a couple months ago that I had been overdoing a type of exercise that I really enjoy, that is very important to me, and that I still I'm really into hiking, and I can overdo it sometimes. Um, but it's really important to me, and it really feeds my soul. But I recognize that I need to do this in a more balanced way. But by recognizing it in a way that I wasn't shaming myself, I've seen that I've been able to make progress and acknowledge, yeah, I overdid it, and I've been able to gradually step it down. So I'm in a much more balanced relationship with it 2 months later, rather than taking a shame-based, I lost my sobriety or something like that. If I'm counting days from from compulsive exercise, I think that would be a really damaging approach for me to take. So, another thing, I will say I do take my spiritual life very seriously. I did before coming into EDA, I did as well. Um, I appreciate that aspect of the EDA literature, that it really, and whether spiritual can be defined in a broad sense, whether that's higher purpose or higher power, and I really appreciate that it does not it does not force religion or religious terms on anyone, and I really appreciate that aspect. Um, but I really like that the literature focuses attention on what matters, and takes it away from obsessing on where I did wrong, how many days do I have clean from X, Y, and Z, etc., and more on what is the next right thing for me to do, taking it back to the present, taking care of basic needs. And that's another big thing for me, is I really, important things for me: sleep, taking care of my body, my basic needs, not overloading myself, having recreation time. These are all very important things for me. I also seek outside help. I have a couple of mental health conditions. I have bipolar 2. I also have OCD, which I was diagnosed with about 5 months ago, which significantly interacts with my eating disorder and compulsive exercise. And I found that by seeking outside help for the OCD, that has really helped to reduce my compulsive exercise issues by addressing my OCD. So, yeah, I found that really helpful. But yeah, I think everyone's recovery can look different, but I'm a big believer in the general principles of the 12 steps that underlie them. I'm not a big believer in dogma, but I'm a big believer in principles. And I just love the message of balance, um, and the strong focus on what matters, from EDA. So with that, I think I will pass.
Michael, if it's all right with you, could we chat for a few minutes?
Sure.
You know, I really appreciate your honesty about your mental health diagnoses and how getting the outside help has had a side benefit of benefiting your eating disorder. I think you are not alone. I know you're not alone in having a dual diagnosis. I was just curious, you were counting calories and going to different food programs and weighing and measuring. Were you doing that in order to eat? Why were you doing that?
I was doing that. I primarily identify as having orthorexia and compulsive exercise, and I had a blood test done, and there was one number on the blood test that was slightly high, and I got really anxious about it. So I was just trying to micromanage all my nutrients in a way to yeah.
And manage those.
Although initially my I should say I really struggled with weight for many years, and about 5.5 years ago I made some major shifts to my diet, some of which I took ideas from other food programs around certain types of food being equivalent to alcohol, and I eliminated them from my diet, and over time, and I forgot to mention all this, but over time, just the scope of the foods I ate just narrowed and narrowed and got extremely narrow by the end. So not only was I really counting calories, but I was the amount of foods I was allowing myself to eat, the range of foods was extremely narrow.
Got it. Were you saying that you were in a larger body at one point in time?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
I was, and that wasn't the case at the time I started counting calories, but it was the case about 2.5 years before that.
Okay, so it sounds like you've been in a larger body, been in a smaller body.
Yep.
It's sort of all one eating disorder.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
You had started talking about your relationship with your higher power and your spirituality, and I think we got a little off track. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. I would say for me, the two ways I connect most strongly with my higher power, one is meditation, which can look like sitting meditation. It also can look like being in nature or moving in nature in silence, which is one of the reasons I like hiking or walking in the woods or swimming or things like that, or cross-country skiing. I really like being in nature in silence. And I find that meditative. So I find that intuitive thoughts often come to me when I'm either meditating or I'm in some sort of meditative silence outdoors. That's one of the main ways I connect with my higher power. But I also find that I do through other people, when I connect with other people and something they say resonates with my experience and resonates with my intuition and something that I just feels like truth.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been great getting to know you a little bit and hearing your story.
We hope you enjoyed today's workshop. More information about Eating Disorders Anonymous can be found at 4eda.org, number 4eda.org. The handouts for this workshop can be found at edahopeforrecovery.com. We encourage you to check out one or more of the many EDA Zoom or in-person meetings. Many of us have found recovery from our eating disorders in these meetings and hope that you will too. Until next time.